I can confidently say that getting into freelance copywriting was one of the best, or arguably the best decision I've ever made in my life to date. But that doesn't mean it hasn't come with its own unique set of challenges. And today I'm going to kind of walk through those challenges and weave in my journey thus far and share whether I think it's worth it or who it might be worth it for, freelancing in general. And it doesn't matter if you're interested in getting into freelance copywriting or some other sort of freelance venture. If you are contemplating whether a service-based freelance model is worth it for you, your personality type, or your goals in life, then hopefully by the end of this video, I can give you some clarity to help you decide whether it's worth it for you. For those of you that are new here, my name is Danae. I'm a freelance copywriter and creative strategist. In the past on this channel, I've posted marketing tips and tricks, but I get a lot of questions all the time about my journey into this world, how I even started. For a long time, I didn't feel comfortable sharing about it. I've had a little bit of imposter syndrome, but I've been self-employed now for 3 full years. I recently moved from Toronto, Canada, where I was born and raised, to London, United Kingdom. So many changes have happened, especially in the past year. And one thing I've continuously done, which has definitely helped me get where I am today, is when I know something could be beneficial for me and or for others, I do it, even if it makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable, because it's in those uncomfortable moments where I grow. So if I'm scared to take a sales call or do work with a specific brand because it's too big and I don't want to mess up, or making a video sharing my journey on YouTube, I will always be happy with the decision to have done it a little bit uncomfortable. So a little bit of a background when it comes to me and my experience in marketing. I went to university in Canada. I did a double major degree in journalism and humanities. At the time, and pretty much from middle school onwards, I had this idea that I would become a journalist because I had one English teacher tell me I was good at English and journalism would be a good job for me. I think that gave me comfort because someone was like, yes, you are good at this thing, and I just never let it go. When I was applying to university, I still felt like it was a good decision. At the time, I was really obsessed with Anthony Bourdain, rest in peace. I loved his documentaries, and I thought that through getting a journalism degree, I could start making documentaries similar to him, not necessarily in the cooking realm, but just interesting documentaries about different parts of the world. I didn't really know a job title specifically like that, but I thought if I worked in the journalism industry long enough, I would end up doing something like that. In journalism school, we did a little bit of documentary filming and learned a little bit about that sort of stuff, but it was mostly boring day-to-day news articles. And I realized quickly that the jobs that I would get right away would be those that I absolutely hated and also didn't allow me any creativity. Yeah, journalists are good writers. They're usually very knowledgeable on a bunch of different topics and they have a good vocabulary and that sort of thing. But the writing itself, news articles, it's super plain and boring and there's not much creativity. So I didn't feel passionate about it. And then I also looked at the salaries. For some reason, the amount of money that I would make right away didn't really cross my mind. I was just thinking so far ahead. So when I saw how much money I would make in my first couple years doing journalism, I thought, this cannot be for me. So I ended up doing a paid internship with a magazine in the meantime to figure out what I wanted to do. And I came across a couple videos on TikTok talking about side hustles. I tried a bunch of side hustles during this time. I was getting paid 20 bucks Canadian an hour for this internship and I wasn't working full time. So I was barely making money from that, but I had time and they would give me really easy tasks, specifically doing social media management, communications, a little bit of journalism, but not really. And in this time, I tried drop shipping and I also tried Etsy print on demand. That worked out for me for about 6 to 9 months and was great because it was also giving me more income so I can kind of still figure out without getting a full-time job, figure out what I wanted to do. And it was through that I started posting content online and I'm learning more about marketing and realizing that because of the skill sets I had gained as a journalist, copywriting really came natural to me and it was something I could hone my skills on. So I put up a website. I had already built up a TikTok audience at this time and I just started posting about copywriting. I got my first couple clients and I'll go into more detail about that, getting clients in a bit, but that's essentially how I got here today. From that, everything just kind of snowballed. I didn't stop. It wasn't easy in the beginning. And again, that's something I'm going to go through, but if I had stopped at any point, I wouldn't have been here and it would have been so easy to stop. It actually would have been much easier to stop. It was inconveniencing me to continue making a couple $100s here and there from clients and working on these projects for 8 hours a day. But I saw what was possible and I was committed to the journey and making this life for myself. So in the beginning, starting any business, but especially freelancing, you are going to go through a grind phase. And in this grind phase, there are specific hardships that you have to go through. First is building the skill set. So I'm completely self-taught in the realm of copywriting. I watched YouTube videos and figured it out. I get a lot of questions about, oh, did you take a course? Like, how did you just get your first client? I knew, okay, here are the basics of copywriting. I understand this. It can't be that hard. And I built my skill set through that. When I was first applying for positions though, and then doing copy, now when I look back and I look at some of the pieces in my portfolio, or actually the work that I was paid to do, I think I wouldn't think this is that good today. I probably wouldn't submit this, but at the time it was sufficient enough and the people accepted it and it worked for them. Maybe once I just had a client give me a lot of revisions, more than expected, but nothing where it was like, you have no understanding of copywriting. So big part of the grind is building the skill set, and you are never going to feel 100% confident in the skill set. And meanwhile, you are learning the skill set and continuing to build on the skill set. You also are learning the technical things when it comes to business. So how are you going to invoice people, collect payments, market yourself, sell your services, do outreach, respond to emails, all the things. There's so many moving parts and aspects. It's not just about the service itself. And as a freelancer, you're doing everything. So in the grind phase, you're building this skill set. You're likely feeling a lot of imposter syndrome and just going through the motions with it. And then also figuring out all those things. So I've tried a bunch of different softwares, let's say, for example, for payment. Some softwares cost more than others to get paid through, or some are free, some aren't. And you might lose on your $300 paycheck that you get from someone an extra $10 because you used a software that just wasn't as good as something else out there. So these are things, again, that I learned through trial and error. And the third point under my grind section is the time. What really matters to get through this phase is how long you can push through. As long as you are not absolutely horrible at what you do, it will get better and you will start to learn. And that's another big thing. You can't just see these issues. So let's say that the payment issue happened. You can't just see this and then not fix it. You then need to take action on it. So, okay, I lost an extra $10 through this payment software. I'm going to make sure I find a new one. So before I get my next client, I know exactly what to do. I'm organized, as professional, and I get all the money that I deserve. It's the time going back and implementing new tactics and learning new skill sets when it comes to the business logistics as well as the skill set. So these are some things that you might not think about in depth because you're just like, I want to get clients, I want to be a freelancer, but then it happens and then you're like, oh, this is actually how it is. The grind is the biggest chunk of the journey. To be honest, I still feel like I'm in this grind season, but it's just become easier. It doesn't really end. Once you start making more money, you can then delegate things to people and or pay for things that make your life easier, which is the point that I'm at now, which makes the grind feel easier. But at the end of the day, it's a consistent grind. Okay, so the next phase, which I've called in my notes the I'm okay. So it comes after the grind, but you might not think about in detail. You know, you pass the grind phase, you start making more money, you kind of have your systems in place, things are good, you're comfortable, you are making consistent income and you feel good. But what ends up happening in this phase is, well, I was gonna say at least for me, but I know majority of people feel this way, is you think it might all fall apart. Wait, before we get into things, if you're new here, I have a newsletter called the Digital Marketing Diaries for brand owners, agency owners, freelancers, creators, where I share tidbits about my journey as a solopreneur, as well as tips and tricks on digital marketing. It's completely free. I send one newsletter out every Friday and you can find it in the description. You think, okay, I have 4 clients right now. They're all paying me $2,000 a month. I have a schedule. I'm pushing out the content. I'm pushing out whatever the service is on time and I'm good. But what if I lose a client and then I lose a $2,000 a month? Or what if I lose all my clients? Or what if something bad happens and I get sick and I can't do the work and then I lose everything? That's a constant fear that will come up. And because of that, you might be constantly trying to gain more clients and make more money, which might burn you out and which might make your client management with your other clients, your client retention weak because you are just focusing on making more money out of fear. Your work ethic might dwindle and then the work that you're doing for your client that is valuable to them is no longer valuable because it's not performing as well because you're not as focused. And there are mindsets and thought processes that can allow you to get through this, which I'll share on my platforms for sure. But this is a big thing that sometimes a lot of people just can't get over, especially if you're someone who really seeks the stability or has enjoyed the stability of a 9 to 5. You might feel like this anxiety that is lingering constantly, if you let it, is too much. So as you make more money in this I'm okay phase, something that could happen, this is a person-to-person thing, and I think depending on your values could happen, is lifestyle creep. So a lot of people might start solopreneurship or making money on the internet or whatever to buy their dream bags or shoes or go on trips or have their dream apartment, whatever the case is. And if you get too excited and too trigger happy with your cards, you might start spending too much, where, okay, yeah, you're making more money, but now you're spending more, or you're spending right at the line. So you're not able to save or invest or set yourself up. And I'm gonna get into that stuff in a bit. But this is something that you should definitely think about before you get into freelancing, is what are you really in it for? What monetary things do you value? And how are you going to budget that into your lifestyle? And when I say budget, I mean, okay, when I hit this milestone, this is what I'll allow myself to do or get. But I'm not gonna buy, this freaking $10,000 watch just because I started making $10,000 a month. Or, that's a bad example, but it's just lifestyle creep is something that can happen, can creep up on you. And then you're like, how did this happen? I'm making so much money. And it's not just in freelancing. This is in any industry, really. I love the YouTuber Caleb Hammer. And you see that people in big corporate positions making $200,000, $300,000 a year, they tend to have a lot of credit card debt and nothing to show for their work because of the lifestyle creep that they've indulged in. So this is something to think about, really important. Because you're completely managing your finances, I think it's a little bit more difficult for freelancers. No one is taking out your taxes for you or savings or building a retirement fund. That's all on you. So you need to be smart about that, especially in your 20s. Your 20s is the prime years for saving or investing. And if you let the lifestyle creep get up to you and you waste those years, I assume it would be really detrimental in the long run. And as I slightly mentioned before, nobody is taking the money out of your income for taxes or investments or savings. So essentially, let's say you're making $10,000 a month from all your clients and you start to spend $10,000 a month, then tax season comes and you owe the government $10,000 or whatever, $8,000, $5,000, and you weren't stewarding your money correctly and you don't have any money to pay them. That can get really sticky because the interest can accrue if you start spending on credit cards, the whole nine. So in the I'm okay stage, these are the things that get people messed up. They live in this constant fear about losing clients and might still indulge in the lifestyle creep, or just feel stuck about how to save money, how to put money aside for taxes, and how to invest for your future. I would 100% recommend watching Caleb Hammer. I'm a Canadian-based creator, and although he shares American finances, or he talks about American finances, it's very similar. But just bare minimum, especially as a freelancer, it's important to have an emergency fund. As a freelancer, a lot of people say emergency fund of 6 months is good. As a freelancer, you should likely have more just because you need that extra cushion. Making sure that you don't have debt. And also just prioritize your goals. I knew when I started, if at the bare minimum it didn't work out forever and I had to stop and I had to go get a job or whatever the case may be, I wanted to pay off my student debt. So the first big chunk of money I made, I used the whole chunk to pay off my student debt. For the past almost exactly 3 years, I've been living off of between $1,500 to $3,000 a month, even though I was making significantly more and or could have lived off of more. But I chose to pay off my student debt. I chose to build a savings, emergency fund, and that kind of thing, because I knew that my anxiety wouldn't let me rest if I didn't do so. And I'm glad I had that mindset. I would also recommend reading the book Broke Millennial. That helped me out a lot when I first started and I had no clue about money. That was really helpful while I listened to it in audio. These are things you should think about. Decide if you're willing to deal with them. And if not, what are your alternatives? Something about me is that I know how much roughly I should set aside for taxes. I do so, but I pay an accountant to manage my books, and that saves me a lot of stress, anxiety, fear, because I know, okay, I'm putting enough for taxes, I'm saving enough in my other accounts, and I don't have to worry about doing my taxes wrong or just the consistent upkeep of it. It could be so much, especially if you're doing all this stuff alone as a freelancer. So paying an accountant a couple thousand a year is worth it on my part, and something that I would definitely recommend if that's like the biggest thing that scares you. You can have consultant calls with them to kind of get a grasp of what you need to do to make sure you're okay at the end of the year or at tax time. And then from there, do as they say, and they manage the rest, and it's just really comforting and easy. So next is not really another phase, but I would say something overall that just happens if you've gone through all of these parts. These are just mindset issues that you might deal with. I've already mentioned the impostor syndrome. The longer you do it, you would think, okay, I'm more skilled. I shouldn't be afraid to get on this sales call or to pitch this project, which you'll feel a little bit more confident, but you'll likely still be dealing with imposter syndrome. That just never ends. It's insane. Also, yes, the fear of losing a client, but also the fear of what's next. You know, oftentimes people will ask you, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Or, okay, so what are you going to do with this money? Or what's your next venture? What are you going to do? I think with freelancers, what the next step usually looks like is creating some sort of passive income, because you are directly tied to the amount of money you make as a freelancer if you are providing a service. So that's usually the next step, and that might also haunt you at nighttime. What am I going to start, or how am I going to get to the next stage? That's constant, and because you're in control and you're working on the client work that you have, but also trying to think about what's next, it can get stressful. And I don't think that's ever ending. I think, okay, you start making passive income, you're gonna start thinking again, what's next? I think at a job, it might be a little bit different. There's a clear path. Okay, what would be next is this position, then this position, whereas you have so many options to choose from when you're doing your own thing. And I think that makes it a little bit more anxiety ridden. Now into my verdict. I'm sure you assumed I would say that I think it's worth it, especially because of the intro, but it is. I think that if you are the right person who is disciplined and you have a strong work ethic and you're a go-getter, you like working by yourself, you don't necessarily need a team and that thing, freelancing could be an amazing venture for you. And I really do think freelancing is going to be much more popular than it is now in 5 to 10 years, as just from the whole boom of everyone taking on their own ventures after COVID was so strong. And you know, there's some strong people still left. There's people who've gone back to their jobs, or like it dwindled, or it didn't really work out for them. But I do think that people value their autonomy more because of what we did experience as a whole in that time, and freelancing will continue to be something that people look into doing. With that being said, how can you go into this knowing everything I just said, but still feeling confident? And I would say the number one thing is to build a plan. What do you want to do? What do you want to get out of it? What are your goals financially? And what steps do you need to take to get there? If you flesh that out and you stick to it, it will give you confidence when you are feeling anxiety. Okay, I have 3 clients right now. I'm making X amount of money. This was my goal. I'm at my goal. Why am I stressing out? That kind of thing. Or I'm almost at my goal. It's only 3 months into the year. I don't need to stress out. Having a plan and seeing it laid out visually consistently will really ease any anxiety or stress. Another thing I would say is actually to start while you have some security. So if you are working a 9 to 5 at the moment, don't go quitting your 9 to 5 and go straight into freelancing. I think for me it was different because I hadn't formally gotten into a 9 to 5 role, but I would recommend, if you are in one, to stay while you have security and build while you have security, and also the least responsibility. When I started, I lived at home with my parents, and I'm so grateful for that. I know that a lot of people don't necessarily have that convenience, and that played a huge role because during the times where I wasn't making as much money, I didn't have to worry too much about paying bills because I only had a couple. I could really make the most out of the little money I had to invest back into myself. Whereas if you have more bills to pay, or you have kids, it could be a bit more difficult. If you have kids and you have a partner, that's a plus. If you are single and you have kids, it's gonna be a little bit more difficult. You just have to be willing to commit to the grind, but the least responsibility you have, the better. And also the more security you have, the better. There is a point where you will receive diminishing returns from having that security. So in my opinion, there's people who, you know, they start making this money and it's like they would get to the next level if they quit their job, but they choose not to. So you have to think about, okay, what makes sense? Where would it make sense? Because there is some sort of risk taking that will get you to, you know, the bigger numbers. But if you're too tied to the security of the job, then you might not take those risks, right? So something to think about. So connecting to that, you have to be open to taking risks, but also just try and think long term. That will help you out a lot. Don't think about the next week or 2 weeks. Think, okay, this month my goal is to do X, and here's how we're gonna achieve that. Or this week, I personally at the moment, I think in weeks. This week, my goal is to just focus on content, filming content, short form, long form, getting that out. Literally, that's actually my goal for this week. And I will finish the week accomplished if I, at the bare minimum, do that. But then obviously there's chances are I'll accomplish other things as well. And if I look at the weeks in that sense, when I look at my broader goals, okay, my broader goal is to reach, you know, X amount of followers or X amount of clients or X amount of whatever by the end of the year, I will achieve that if I just focus on these little small wins day to day, week to week. So think long term and focus on what actions you need to take every day to get you to that point. And last, but definitely not least, be open to seasons. There are going to be seasons where you make more money. There's going to be seasons where you lose a client. There's going to be seasons where things seem amazing and easy and you're working 2 hours a day. And there's going to be seasons where it seems like you're working literally 24/7. That's just the game. That's just how it is. And you have to be open to that if this is something that you're interested in doing. Yeah, hopefully that was insightful. A little bit of insight on what your journey might look like as a freelancer to help you decide whether it's worth it for you.